Hello, my name is Fred Widdowson, and I'm reading from my fiction book, a series of Miseries, a novella. It's a little crime drama, and I've already read chapter one. I hope you listen to it. And now I'm going to read chapter two. These are brief chapters, so I will try to do this regularly until you get to hear the whole story. It's got a couple of twists and turns in it, so I hope you enjoy it. I enjoyed writing it. So, chapter two. Now, Zumi sent an officer that Red knew and liked to his house to pick him up to take him to the O'Brien home. Daquan Sims, a Georgia transplant, had been the first African American on the force in the early days. He was smart, careful, kept to himself, but was very good at what he did. He breezed past the patrolman phase of a police career and moved into the detective role relatively quickly. But it was unlikely that he would ever be chief because of unconscious or conscious racial bias, or so Red thought. Daquan smiled as Red hopped into the car. "Hey, Red, how you been?" Red patted Daquan's forearm. "I'm okay. I guess you know about this O'Brien suicide." As he drove off, Daquan frowned. "Yeah, I know you went to tell him he was cleared as a courtesy to him and a favor to Zumi, so it's kind of strange." Red thought about Kathy O'Brien and what she must be going through. His own wife had left him 2 years after their daughter's suicide. Families have a hard time in the wake of a child's suicide. Sometimes blame and recriminations replace an actual consideration of each other's suffering. The suicide of their only child turned Red mean and inward looking, depressed, angry, and made his own wife, Julia, turn away from their marriage. It had been a long time now, 18 years of living alone. He had removed all of their pictures from his home, all the family photos, and even any picture of himself. If you walked into Red's home, you would be hard pressed to know he lived there unless you ransacked his bills to pay drawer. Kathy O'Brien received Red into her home, while Daquan waited in the car. This was to be very personal, and Daquan agreed it would not do for him to tense up the situation by taking notes. Kathy spoke to Red as she opened the door for him before he could say anything. "I don't want you to think I'm angry at you, Red, but my husband has been a good man by even your standards for decades, and he didn't deserve your interrogation. I know it wasn't your doing, but you were asked to do it." She ushered him into the living room and waved her hand for him to sit down. Not sitting down, Red blurted out, "It wasn't an interrogation. We had a nice friendly chat over coffee, and it ended on a light note. I told him he was cleared and we weren't pursuing anything regarding him. That's not what he took from it. He killed himself because he couldn't take being harassed, being persecuted by you people." Red replied gently and softly, "I'm sorry it came out this way. Sorry it turned out this way. That was not my intention. I'm shocked and saddened at his death." He paused for a moment and his old policeman's ways came into focus. "Did he have a cell phone or a laptop I could look at?" "Why?" Kathy asked, with a look of concern on her face. "I was just wondering if you told anyone he was thinking about suicide." Red knew from his own experience with his daughter that about half the people who attempt suicide make the final decision within a few minutes of the act, but he wanted to be thorough. Hesitantly, Kathy led Red to her husband's office. There on his desk was a laptop computer and a smartphone. Red asked, "Do you know his password?" Kathy nodded but said nothing, and then she wrote the password on a pad on the desk. She looked away from Red, gazing out of a window. She didn't turn back to him with what he thought was either a concerned look on her face or perhaps just an expression of the stress of grief at her husband's suicide. Red logged into O'Brien's phone after turning it on. There was one incoming text and one outgoing text since their meeting. A local financial counselor had texted O'Brien hours before his suicide. The financial counselor had written, "Don't forget your appointment tomorrow at 9 a.m. Remember, you asked me to remind you." Red might have been taken aback by this had he not read in his research after his daughter's suicide that people who attempt suicide often make appointments for a time that would have been after their death, if their death was planned. In other words, a scheduled appointment that should have happened after a suicide meant little. The outgoing text was different. It was to Red. He tried to remain impassive and not give away his shock. "Can I just keep this just for today? I'll return it and the laptop tomorrow." Kathy asked rather too quickly, "Did you find anything?" Red lied. "Just that he had an appointment scheduled today at his financial counselor's, but that doesn't mean all that much." Kathy said nothing but pursed her lips tightly. She acquiesced that Red take the cell phone. "I'm not a cop anymore," he thought. "I'm not screwing up any evidence in any way. They've already concluded it was a suicide." She probably handed them over to him because she was not thinking clearly and suffering too much grief to take a stance and say no. Perhaps she didn't want to appear guilty of anything, like maybe an argument they had before O'Brien died. That's how he justified taking the items in his own head, although he couldn't really use a friend's concern as a reason, as he and O'Brien were hardly buddies. Red plopped himself down in the car next to Daquan. Holy crap, Daquan. O'Brien texted last night before he killed himself. Daquan was surprised. What'd he say? Red looked straight ahead and didn't look at Daquan. He said he needed to speak to me urgently about something really important. It was urgent. Didn't you see the text on your phone? No, Red replied, and I don't know why. Sometimes my incoming texts are delayed. People tell me anyway that they've sent me a text and I get it a few hours later, but it is rare. There was an incoming text from his financial counselor reminding him of a meeting this morning, but that doesn't mean anything particularly when it comes to suicide. However, the text to me changes everything. Daquan confirmed what Red was thinking. It sounds fishy, but what I think I know about your meeting with him. The text about his appointment, his text to you, and how he was found. I'd say this isn't suicide. Red snapped his head around and looked at Daquan. What was it about how he was found? Well, he hung himself, but the knot was pretty complicated. Took a long time to prepare it. It wasn't something a desperate or deeply depressed person would need to make to kill themselves. It looked like something a sailor would tie to secure something. It was just pretty much too ornate to be done by someone who felt persecuted and couldn't take anymore. Red said grimly, Don't take me home. I need to speak to Zumi. Red considered what Daquan had revealed as they drove to the station. That's all we'll do today. Chapter 3 next. Thank you for listening.